I thought my family hated me on Christmas. Then they had the nerve to send me a $25,000 bill for my sister's car. What I did next changed everything. Let me tell you what happened, and if it moves you, remember to support our channel by hitting subscribe, leaving a like, and sharing it with people who care. My name is Elliot Caro. I'm 28, I live alone, and I work hard just to keep my life steady. I've always tried to keep things simple and avoid drama, but my family, well, they've never made me feel welcome. My sister Marla is 26, always floating through life as if the world owes her something. My parents, Derek and Lorna, are distant and critical. No matter what I did, it was never enough. That Christmas, I thought maybe things could be different. I imagined a warm family gathering, laughter, maybe even a moment where I felt seen. But when I walked in, I realized how wrong I was. They barely noticed I existed. They opened gifts without me, laughing and teasing each other while I stood awkwardly in the corner. Marla flashed that smug smile she always wears when she thinks she's the favorite. My parents made little comments that stung more than they realized, little digs that I tried to ignore, but each one sank deeper than the last. After the awkward silence and forced smiles, I thought it couldn't get worse. Then it did. A few days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. My heart sank when I saw the words on the paper. A $25,000 invoice. They claimed I owed it for Marla's new car. I stared at the numbers over and over, thinking it was some kind of mistake. I checked and rechecked, called them, but my parents insisted I was responsible. It's only fair, they said. You've benefited from family support all your life. I felt my chest tighten with anger and disbelief. I had spent years quietly helping wherever I could, giving them time, support, and patience, and this was their thanks. Suddenly, all the little betrayals, the ignored birthdays, the condescending remarks, they made sense. It wasn't an accident. My family had always looked down on me, and now they were trying to take advantage in the most outrageous way possible. In that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. Something inside me shifted. I felt a mix of rage and determination that I hadn't felt before. I knew I had to do something, not just for the money, but for my dignity. I would make sure they understood exactly what it feels like to be underestimated and ignored. That Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It became the starting point for my plan. The plan that would turn the tables and finally show my family that underestimating me was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. I couldn't sleep after that bill showed up. I just lay there in the dark replaying every holiday I'd ever spent with my family. It was like watching a long, painful movie I never wanted to see again. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every birthday, I remembered standing in rooms full of people who were supposed to care about me, yet somehow I always felt invisible. They talked around me, over me, through me, never to me. I remembered the way they laughed with Marla, how my parents always lit up when she entered the room, and how their faces went dull the moment they looked at me. Those memories hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just the money. It was years of being ignored. Years of pretending I didn't mind. The next day, they asked me to come over for a discussion. I already knew what that meant. They wanted to control the story before I pushed back. I sat at their dining table while they acted like nothing unusual had happened. My father cleared his throat and said, almost proudly, "We think the bill is fair. Marla needed help, and family supports each other." Supports each other. The words almost made me laugh. My mother nodded like she was handing out wisdom. "You're older, Elliot. It's your responsibility to step up. We've done so much for you." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were cold, like this was all a business transaction. Marla sat beside them, wide-eyed and fake innocent. "I didn't want to cause any trouble," she said softly. But I caught it, the quick little smirk she tried to hide. The kind of smirk someone gives when they know they've gotten away with something. It made my stomach twist. As they kept talking, something in my chest got tighter and tighter. I wasn't even listening anymore. My thoughts were running louder than their voices. I gave them everything, and this is the thanks I get. I had helped them move houses, fix things around the home, loan money I never asked back, showed up whenever they needed me, even when they never showed up for me. And all they saw when they looked at me was a wallet they hadn't finished emptying. They kept pushing, explaining why I owed Marla this, why I should take responsibility, why I should stop making things difficult. It felt like they were punching me with their words, each one sharper than the last. My father finally said, "We expect the payment by the end of the month." That was it. The moment something cold and still settled inside me. I stared at them, not angry anymore, just done. They didn't know it, but they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I nodded slowly, letting them think they'd won, letting them feel comfortable, letting them believe I was the same quiet Elliot who always swallowed his pride. But inside, a different version of me was waking up. A version who wasn't going to be stepped on anymore. That was the moment I knew. Revenge wasn't just a possibility. It was a promise. After that meeting, I realized one thing clearly. Taking legal action against my family wasn't going to work. The $25,000 bill wasn't just ridiculous. It was cleverly disguised to make me look like the unreasonable one. Lawyers would see it as a family dispute, and I'd be the troublemaker. That thought should have frustrated me more, but instead, it lit a fire inside me. If the law couldn't help, I would find another way. I started small, quietly observing, taking notes and documenting everything. Every careless decision, every financial mistake, every slip-up they made that could be used later. I wasn't doing this out of hate alone. I was doing it for justice, for the years I'd been ignored, for every insult that had been dismissed. My notebook grew thick fast, dates, amounts, errors, inconsistencies. I kept it hidden where they'd never think to look. Marla became a particular focus. I knew the car was the catalyst, so I began to dig into it. I researched registration records, insurance claims, and even traffic tickets she'd gotten. Each detail mattered. Each tiny mistake became a thread I could pull. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how careless they all had been. They had no idea I was paying attention. It wasn't just about the car. It was about creating a plan that could hit them in ways they couldn't ignore, emotionally and financially. I sketched out ideas, weighing risks and outcomes. I imagined subtle moves first, small disruptions that would make them question each other. Then bigger steps, moves that would show them I wasn't the helpless one anymore. I wanted them to feel the shock of realizing they had underestimated me for decades. At night, I would sit alone and think through every detail. How could I make sure nothing traced back to me? How could I use their own mistakes against them? I created lists, charts, and timelines, treating it almost like a project at work. Anger fueled my focus. Every memory of being ignored or insulted sharpened my resolve. Every dollar they tried to claim from me became a reminder of what they thought I was worth. I realized revenge wasn't about being cruel. It was about control. I had spent my life letting them set the rules. Now I would set them. I imagined the satisfaction of seeing them scramble, of watching the cracks appear in their perfect little world. I knew patience would be my ally. I couldn't rush it, or it would all unravel. By the end of the week, my plan was taking shape. I had identified every weak point, every opportunity to exploit, every path that could give me leverage without leaving evidence behind. I wasn't acting recklessly. I was precise, calculated, and patient. My anger had turned into something sharp and focused, a tool I could wield carefully. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not in a reckless, loud way, but in a quiet, dangerous way. They thought they had control, but soon, they would see who really was in charge. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be about the money. They would feel the weight of every year they had dismissed me. My first move had to be small, something subtle enough that no one would suspect me, but strong enough to send a quiet warning. Marla's car was the perfect place to start. I had already researched everything about it, from the registration dates to the insurance lapses she thought no one knew about. There was a tiny legal loophole I found, something most people never paid attention to. If a certain document wasn't filed correctly during renewal, the registration could be delayed for weeks. Not denied, just slowed down. Long enough to cause problems. It took me one evening to set it up. A few online forms, a couple of mailed documents timed precisely, and the system would flag her file for additional review. Nothing extreme. Nothing illegal. Just enough to nudge the process off track. I didn't feel nervous. I felt strangely calm. After years of being dismissed, taking action felt steadying. A few days later, the reaction exploded. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from my mom. Marla can't get her car registered. They told her something was missing. Your father thinks she messed up the paperwork. I didn't reply. I just read each message like they were lines in a script I'd written. Marla was furious. Apparently she had driven all the way to the office only to be told she had to come back with more documents. She blamed the clerk, then the system, then finally my parents. My father shot back, saying she never pays attention to anything important. My mother defended her, which only made the argument louder. I sat in my apartment, sipping coffee, watching their drama unfold from a distance. It was the first time I had ever seen them turn on each other over something so small. A tiny delay in paperwork was all it took to shake their perfect confidence. What surprised me most was how natural it felt to watch them struggle without stepping in. For years, every time something went wrong, I was expected to fix it, carry it, smooth it over. Now I was simply observing. It was strangely satisfying, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I finally saw what happened when I wasn't the one holding everything together. The tension spread quickly. My father blamed Marla's carelessness. Marla insisted she had followed all the steps. My mother snapped at both of them for overreacting. They had no idea the situation was barely the size of a spark, yet it lit up every hidden weakness in their family bond. And I felt it, the power shift. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a change in air pressure. For the first time, they weren't looking at me as the problem. They weren't looking at me at all. They were too busy blaming each other. I could see the cracks forming already, thin but spreading. And I knew this was only the beginning. The tension I had started with the car registration delay grew faster than I expected. It wasn't just a small inconvenience anymore. It had opened a door I hadn't fully anticipated. Derek and Lorna were now openly arguing, and it wasn't subtle anymore. I overheard my mom yelling at my father over the phone, accusing him of being careless with bills and investments. My father fired back, blaming her for mismanaging accounts and not keeping track of deadlines. Their voices rose higher and higher, like they were competing to see who could be the angriest. Marla wandered around in confusion, trying to act helpful but clearly suspicious. She asked questions, but every time she did, they snapped at her or ignored her. Her smirk had vanished. She didn't know who to trust or where the next blow would come from. It was fascinating, in a quiet, unnerving way, to watch the carefully maintained image of my family crumble right in front of me. I had learned long ago that the smallest push in the right place could create chaos. So I started dropping anonymous tips to creditors and insurance companies, little notes that pointed out inconsistencies or missing payments. Nothing illegal, nothing traceable back to me. Just the facts presented in a way that made them look negligent or disorganized. And it worked. Calls started coming in, warnings arrived, letters piled up. My family, already stressed and blaming each other, began to falter under the pressure. Each message I sent was like a ripple across still water, growing into waves of chaos. Derek blamed Lorna for everything, Lorna blamed Derek, and Marla blamed both of them while wondering if she'd been responsible for something. Their usual composure was gone. The sense of control they always projected vanished into panic. From my apartment, I observed it all quietly. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't interfere beyond sending the tips. I wanted to see the cracks form naturally, to watch them turn on each other without realizing why. There was a strange satisfaction in seeing them stumble, in finally feeling the balance shift slightly in my favor. For so long, they had been untouchable, controlling every conversation and every decision. Now finally they were exposed, vulnerable. But as I watched, a pang of guilt hit me. I realized I was enjoying their panic, even though it came from years of my own suffering. I had spent so long being patient and invisible, and now, seeing them struggle without me as the target was oddly thrilling, but also uncomfortable. The guilt reminded me that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice for myself, a reclamation of control I had never been allowed to have. Still, the pull of strategy and the rush of seeing their world tilt were undeniable. Every argument they had, every mistake they made, every frustrated glance exchanged between them strengthened my resolve. I stayed low, silent, almost invisible, while the drama escalated around them. For the first time, my family was unraveling without any help from me in the open, and it felt like the perfect moment to continue building on the chaos, carefully, quietly, until the final outcome belonged to me. I decided it was time to shift things in a different direction. Something quieter, something that would let me get closer without raising suspicion. So I reached out to Marla and invited her over, calling it a holiday reconciliation. I kept my tone warm, soft, almost apologetic. She accepted immediately, probably thinking she finally had the upper hand again. Before she arrived, I prepared everything. I placed my phone where it could record our conversation without being noticed. Papers, notes, and a few documents I had collected stayed tucked away, ready for use if needed. I didn't plan on pushing too hard. I only wanted her to talk, to slip, to reveal details she never would if she felt threatened. When Marla walked in, she acted like she was stepping onto a stage. She sighed loudly, shook her head, and said things like, I really hope you're ready to fix things. As if I were the one who had caused all the chaos. I let her settle, offered her a drink, and listened. Soon enough, she started her guilt routine. She talked about how stressful everything had been for her, how her parents were falling apart, and how she felt hurt by my distance. She painted herself like a victim in a story she had written for herself. But this time, I didn't show emotion. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I simply sat back, watching her closely, responding with slow, calm words that made her squirm. I understand, I told her. But things fall apart when the truth starts coming out. She froze at that. It wasn't a direct threat, but it was enough to make her shift uncomfortably. Every time she tried to guilt me, I answered with something vague but sharp. Little hints. Subtle reminders that I wasn't as clueless or forgiving as I used to be. People forget what they've done, I said softly. But the details always come back eventually. I saw it, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what I had collected. And the mystery scared her more than any accusation could. By the time she left, she was quieter than usual, unsure, her confidence cracked. She kept glancing back at me, like she was trying to figure out who I had become. After she walked out the door, my phone was filled with everything I needed, her complaints, her contradictions, her attempt to twist things in her favor. More pieces added to my growing collection. The next few days, my family behaved differently. They didn't know what had changed, but they sensed it. Whenever I spoke, they paid attention. Whenever I stayed silent, they looked worried. My calmness unsettled them in a way anger never could. This was the quiet before the storm. And even though they couldn't see it yet, the wind was already shifting in my direction. The information I had gathered over the past weeks was finally enough to move to the next step. I wasn't rushing, and I wasn't acting out of anger anymore. Everything I did now came from a cold, steady place inside me, a place that simply wanted balance. Justice. Maybe revenge. I sat at my desk late at night, going through the notes I had collected about my family's finances. There were mistakes everywhere, missed payments, false filings, debts they pretended didn't exist. They had built their lives on the idea that they were organized, responsible, better than everyone else. But behind the curtain, it was all barely held together. All I had to do was tug on the weak threads. Using legal channels, I filed quiet notifications that triggered reviews on their accounts. Nothing dramatic, nothing that pointed to me. Just the truth placed in the right hands. Asset reviews, account freezes, questions from financial institutions. Things that made everything slow down or stop until corrected. And they had so many errors that correcting wasn't going to be easy. The first sign came from Derek's business. He tried to make a large purchase, only to find the transaction delayed. Then another. And another. His business partner questioned him, clients grew irritated, and whispers started circulating. I heard from one of his co-workers that he lost his temper in the office lobby. It didn't take long for people to talk. Derek hated nothing more than appearing incompetent, so watching his reputation crack must have eaten at him. Lorna didn't fare any better. She had always cared about how she looked to others, her friends, neighbors, her book club ladies. So when news spread that a charity check she'd attempted to give got declined due to her account being under review, she must have wanted to disappear. Someone even joked that she should double-check her math next time. She tried to laugh it off, but people remembered moments like that. Her pride took the hit hardest. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, invisible. I kept my distance, acted confused when they mentioned trouble, and offered soft, useless comments like, "Maybe things will get sorted out soon." They didn't suspect me at all, not even once. Instead, they turned on each other. Derek accused Lorna of mismanaging money. Lorna blamed Derek for hiding expenses. Marla blamed both of them for being careless, and they blamed her for adding to their stress. The house that once looked perfectly controlled was now full of slammed doors, sharp comments, and silent dinners. Watching it unfold gave me a strange mix of emotions. There was a thrill in knowing I finally had power after years of being the one pushed aside. There was empowerment in seeing them held accountable for the mistakes they always ignored. But there was also bitterness, deep, heavy bitterness, that it took this level of chaos for them to feel even a hint of what they had put me through. Still, I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not yet. The balance was shifting, and I wasn't ready to let go until everything was set right. The moment had come. After weeks of careful planning and quiet observation, I had uncovered Marla's biggest secret: the car accident she had failed to report properly. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to create serious financial and legal trouble if revealed. And because I had documented everything meticulously, I could prove the negligence without leaving a trace pointing back to me. I chose my timing carefully. It was during a small family gathering, casual, seemingly innocent. I brought up Marla's car insurance in conversation, pretending I was just trying to help her. At first, she laughed, brushing it off, confident that nothing could touch her. That smirk was back, the same one she had always used to hide what she thought were harmless secrets. But I let her talk, guiding the conversation subtly. Questions here, a casual comment there, until finally she slipped. She admitted, without realizing the weight of her words, that she had not properly reported the accident and had falsified some details to avoid insurance complications. I stayed calm, nodding, taking mental notes. Every contradiction she made was another thread I could pull. Then I leaned back, smiled gently, and said, "Funny how these little mistakes can grow into big problems if someone notices." My tone was soft, almost conversational, but there was an edge she could feel. Her eyes widened as the implications started to sink in. The rest of the family froze. Derek and Lorna had never seen me act like this, so composed, so controlled. They realized something shocking. Elliot Caro was no longer the quiet, passive one who tolerated their insults. I had been patient, intelligent, calculating, and they had completely underestimated me. Marla's face turned red with fury. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off calmly. "Do you understand now why I didn't trust you before?" I said softly. "Do you see why I've been careful all this time?" Derek stammered, Lorna gasped. For the first time, they felt unsure, vulnerable, and exposed. They had relied on my passivity for years, taking me for granted, thinking I wouldn't fight back. Now they were seeing the truth. I had been observing, documenting, planning, and quietly waiting for the right moment. I stood and faced them fully, voice steady but firm. "You have no idea what it's like to be ignored, belittled, dismissed by the people who are supposed to care about you. I've spent my life giving, helping, staying quiet while you hurt me, and this $25,000 bill for a car I never asked for was the last straw. You think you can control everything, but you forgot one thing. I see everything." Marla's fury was almost tangible, trembling with rage and fear. Derek and Lorna looked down, ashamed, embarrassed, unsure of how to respond. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For years, I had been the invisible one. Now, I was the one holding the truth, the leverage, the patience that had finally paid off. The room was silent for a moment, thick with tension. And in that silence, I realized something had changed forever. Not just between me and them, but in how I saw myself. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't just the quiet observer. I was someone they couldn't underestimate, someone they couldn't control. And for the first time in my life, I felt fully seen. By the time I decided to take the final steps, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not just recognition, but justice. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but a reckoning that would make my family finally understand the consequences of their actions. Every piece of information I had collected, every careful move I had made over the past weeks, was ready to be used. I began by formally notifying financial institutions about the inconsistencies I had documented, presenting the facts in a way that made it impossible for them to ignore. I didn't exaggerate, didn't bend the truth. I simply let the evidence speak for itself. The result was immediate. Accounts were frozen for review, transactions delayed, and auditors demanded explanations. My parents' careful facade of control began to crack in front of everyone who mattered: clients, friends, neighbors. Derek's business, which had always been a source of pride, stumbled under the scrutiny. Contracts were questioned, deals delayed, and partners started doubting his reliability. In social circles, rumors began to spread, not maliciously, but naturally, as the cracks in their family's perfect image became visible. Lorna, who had always prided herself on appearances, felt the sting of whispers and sideways glances from people she once considered friends. Every public interaction became a small humiliation, subtle but unrelenting. Marla was left reeling. Her arrogance had vanished, replaced by a quiet panic. She realized, too late, that her negligence and deceit could no longer be hidden. She tried to defend herself, to cast blame elsewhere, but the evidence was undeniable. Every excuse she had leaned on in private discussions fell flat. She was forced to confront the reality she had ignored for so long. Through it all, I stayed distant, calm, invisible. I didn't need to shout or point fingers. I didn't need to dramatize or make threats. My satisfaction came quietly, in the knowledge that the truth was doing its work, that the missteps and negligence of years were finally catching up with them. I had orchestrated it carefully, and no one could tie it back to me. I had achieved the upper hand without ever crossing legal or ethical lines. When I finally met them face to face, the difference was palpable. The arrogance, the confidence, the smug superiority that had always defined them, gone. They looked at me differently now, uncertain, cautious, even afraid. It wasn't vengeance in the way movies show it. It was something quieter, sharper. It was the knowledge that I had been underestimated my entire life, and now they had no choice but to acknowledge me. As I walked away from that confrontation, relief washed over me. The tension that had been building for years finally released. I had claimed what was rightfully mine, not just financially, but emotionally. The bitterness lingered, yes, a reminder of the betrayal I had endured, but it was tempered by triumph. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life and my destiny. My family was fractured, their reputation damaged, their arrogance exposed. And I, Elliot Caro, had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and fully aware of the power that comes from patience, observation, and careful planning. This wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a life where I was finally seen, respected, and untouchable. The family gathering was quiet, almost awkward. I had returned once more, not to participate, but to witness the aftermath of everything I had set in motion. The house that had always felt suffocating now seemed smaller, emptier, and strangely unfamiliar. Derek and Lorna avoided eye contact, each lost in their own shame and embarrassment. Marla sat silently, fuming quietly, unsure how to react or what to say. I didn't need to speak. My presence alone was enough. As I stood there, I felt the strange mix of emotions that had become familiar over the past weeks. There was grief for the years I had spent invisible, for the countless times I had been dismissed, belittled, and overlooked. There was anger too, hot and sharp, that burned for the betrayals, for the audacity of a family who had treated me as if I didn't matter. And yet, mingled with these heavier feelings, there was satisfaction. The quiet, powerful satisfaction of knowing I had reclaimed control over my life and my dignity. I realized more clearly than ever that family loyalty is a fragile thing. It isn't just given, it's earned. I had given my family years of patience, effort, and love, and they had returned disdain and exploitation. That truth could not be undone, but it could be acknowledged, even if silently. And acknowledging it was my form of liberation. Walking away, I felt an unexpected lightness. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their judgments, their expectations, or their constant critiques. I wasn't trapped in the cycle of trying to please or appease. I was free, independent, self-reliant, and fully aware of my own strength. The world outside the house felt different. Every step I took away from the gathering felt like a reclaiming of my life, a distancing from the toxicity I had endured for so long. As I reflected on everything, I understood something fundamental. Growth often comes from pain, and strength from adversity. I had been forced into patience, forced into careful observation, forced into strategy. Those years of being overlooked had honed me, sharpened my mind, and given me a resolve I never would have discovered otherwise. The revenge I enacted wasn't just about payback. It was about proving to myself that I could survive, thrive, and claim my place in a world that had often ignored me. And yet, even in this victory, there was a bittersweet note. I mourned the family I had once hoped for, the warmth, the support, the love that had been absent. That loss would never fully leave me, but it was balanced now by the power of self-realization and the justice I had achieved. I knew I would carry both grief and pride with me, intertwined like threads of the same tapestry. I had endured betrayal, orchestrated my own form of reckoning, and emerged not just intact, but transformed. My life ahead would be my own, defined not by those who underestimated me, but by the choices I made, the strength I discovered, and the dignity I reclaimed. In the end, I walked into the evening with my head high, a quiet smile on my face, and the knowledge that I had survived and triumphed. This was my story, a tale of betrayal, patience, strategy, and ultimate growth. Bittersweet, yes, but undeniably mine. Do you think Elliot made the right choice by stepping away from his family? Or should he have tried to repair things despite everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future stories.